So, cari fratelli e sorelle, and welcome to my weekly video blog. Before I carry on with the getting to know me set, I want to first give a little cameo. This to me is why my family is so special. I was not very well this week. One day on the Friday I was sent home from work, so that's how ill I was. That doesn't very often happen at all, but it did happen, and I'm more or less recovered now. I mean, I slept about 15 hours, and sleep is a marvellous thing for me. It sort of, if there's anything that's not too bad, then I can usually get over it if I just sleep. So, you know, that was okay. And naturally, obviously, I was on the on my text phone, saying to, you know, my parents and various other members of my family, "Oh dear, not feeling too well. You know, gone home, going to bed, etc., etc." When I woke up in the evening, my parents had been in Ripon, and they decided that they were going to bring me a little first aid emergency bag. So they'd obviously been shopping, and they got me some cola, because flat Coke when you're not feeling very well actually settles the stomach pretty well. They got me some Lucozade so that when I was feeling better, or a little bit better, or sort of recovering, I could have some energy, because I wasn't eating at the time. They bought me some little bread rolls and some plain chicken, so that once I was feeling ready to eat, I could pretty much eat that, because that's pretty plain and pretty bland and wouldn't do me sort of much harm as my first meal, so to speak. They bought me £10 so that I may get a taxi into work the next day instead of walk. And they got me a little gift from Ripon, which is where they were at the time. And of course they brought all that round in a little bag, and they didn't come in because obviously they were busy doing other things, and they had to see other family members as well. And one of the things that we try to do is, if we are not well, we sort of quarantine ourselves, basically, because the last thing we want to do is give people who are, we have elderly members of the family, and we have very, very, very young members of the family, and we do not want to give them any lurgies. So if we're unwell, it's the general rule is let people know and quarantine yourself for a couple of days. But they can come round and drop stuff on the doorstep, and then I retrieve it. And I don't know why, but that made my day. I was just like thrilled. That is exactly what our family's like, and I didn't ask for that at all. That was them thinking, oh dear, there's something wrong. What can we do to make it better? And I'd like to think that you know, I would contribute towards that sort of thing. You know, cheering people up to other members of the family if they were in a similar situation. Now, 2005, we reach a spiritual chapter, and I thought it would be best, this would be a good point at which to sort of sum up the spirituality up from, you know, basically from birth to 2005, because it's early spirituality, really. It's my foundation, rather than the next sort of decade, which is suddenly things move a lot quicker. So I'm going to go through the list of spiritual events first, some of which you'll know because I've covered them in this series. Obviously, 1982, the year I was born, I had an infant baptism. You know, because I've told you about the first testimony, the second testimony, and the third testimony, although the third testimony is called the first contact, so that might help you understand that, because I think I refer to it as first contact rather than the third testimony. The Bilton Protocol, which is something that I haven't really discussed with you. The Bilton Protocol was something that happened when I was at university, and it was basically a life treaty. A life treaty for me is when I basically write down a list of things that I want to improve about myself and my life. It's not like the 5-year programme, because it's very specific in what it is. So basically it's more like the establishment of new rotas and stuff like that. So that was the first one that was done, and it happened really as a response to the fact that my student house collapsed. People pulled out of it, left me high and dry, and I needed to assess my relationship, I suppose, with friends and with others, and what I considered friendship and what I thought was, most important. So that's the Bilton Protocol, which ironically happened on the 8th of April, exactly a year before the Covenant, which I have spoken to you about, which was, of course, the issue of all self-harm and all that sort of stuff. Same date, but a year later for that. In 2003, there was my confirmation, which I spoke to you about in the Living and Learning blogs, and then there was something called the Carrick Canon, which was the second sort of life treaty, if you like, and that was sort of in 2004. When it comes to list of spiritual chapters, obviously you know about most of them. The first one, the Sunday Christian, it was just when I was living off my parents' faith. The first Great Questioning, obviously. The Search for Self, which was, I suppose, a minor thing that led to the second Great Questioning. But it was really my search into different religions, different denominations, things like that. Pop 2000, which was, Power of Prayer, really. It was, now I can't remember if it was a course or what exactly it was, but it was an exploration into that. The second Great Questioning, obviously membership of the church, which was the confirmation, and then we get to chapter 7, basically, and that is the amendment. Now, I have spoken to you about the Primrose Path, and I've spoken to you about the War You Wage, and the amendment is, I suppose, the reform that's based on that, and it's the first of several spiritual enlightenments, I suppose you might like to call it, about forgiveness. And obviously I had been terribly wronged during the summer of 2004, and I had harboured a lot of grief and a lot of anger, and the people that had wronged me would never and have never owned up to their mistakes. They've constantly denied that they did anything wrong. I think the most I got was that their actions were regrettable, but they've stopped short of an apology, and they weren't going to do an apology. And 6 months later I thought to myself, look, the problem is that the anger and the hatred that I have about this issue is doing me more harm than it is them. And one of the things that sort of triggered that was, in fact, watching a film called Doing Hard Time, and it's a film about somebody who wants to get revenge, basically, and the way that sort of backfires and ends up destroying the innocent person who wants it, rather than actually solving anything to do with the original perpetrators of the crime. And that sort of inspired me, in fact, to I won't say apologise because I did nothing wrong, but to go and say, look, I'm leaving this matter now. I'm moving on. I'm not going to be angry about it anymore. I've pretty much forgiven them for what they did. I won't forget because the learning curves are absolutely vital. But there's no use in keeping hatred and keeping bitterness inside and anger, because in the end all they do is destroy the person who harbours them. They don't get even. They don't bring about justice. They do more damage to the innocent party, and that was one thing that I learned. And so I think we only now have one more thing to discuss before we move on to a different season, and a season that's more like what you know now of me, basically. Now, we're at 2005 now, and I'm not going to go beyond 2010, despite the fact that I'm living now in 2015, because a lot of these things I can only see their relevance and their true nature in hindsight. So I'm going to go up to some of the spiritual events in early 2010, and then I'm going to stop, and it will be, I don't know, sometime in the future, many years probably, before I sort of do a revisit this sort of project, and I suppose update it. So, you know, we are in the home stretch, I suppose. And now, the birthdays. Only 4 people are lucky enough to have their birthday this week on my list, so many happy returns to all of these, and I hope you eat lots and lots of cake. We've got John Roundtree, Levon Maynard, Joshua Sampo, and Manaza Zahir, who is probably celebrating Eid as well, so I hope her celebrations are going well with that. And that's it for this week.